Hello, and welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. The circular economy is a vision for a world in which the materials used in products and packaging flow perpetually through the economy, used over and over instead of being tossed into landfills and replaced with newly mined, refined, and processed stuff each generation of product. Recycling, an industry with about a 50-year history, is generally considered the most important leg in the circular economy vision. But our guest today, Knoxfill founder Michaela Barnett, recently wrote an article for The Conversation that argued convincingly that recycling has struggled to live up to its circular vision. She says the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle, are not sufficient to make the circular economy go round and round. And we at Earth911 agree. Michaela started Knoxfill, a retail store in Knoxville, Tennessee, that offers refillable and sustainably made products for hair care, home cleaning, skin care, and around the kitchen. Now, back to the article that caught my attention. Michaela and a group of co-authors that included professors at the University of Virginia and Indiana University surveyed consumers to understand their relationship with the recycling system and other circular economy ideas. People in general believe their most impactful choices that help the environment are related to reducing the volume of products and especially plastic packaging they use. Over the next 5 years, society needs to reduce its carbon emissions by about 50% to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And reducing and reusing products, which lowers the demand for new products, are among the most powerful levers available. As Earth911 prepares to introduce new information services that will help you find local reuse options, let's explore the many paths available and example that Knoxfill's focus on refilling and reusing household products can teach us. You can learn more about Knoxfill at knoxfill.com. That's Knoxfill.com, knoxfill.com. Now let's get to the conversation. Welcome to the show, Michaela. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. And your article really did catch my attention. I wanted to talk about a lot of things, but can you tell us about your background? Because you've got a PhD and you've been doing a lot of research, but you also started Knoxfill, which is a retail location.
Yeah, so I started Knoxfill, which is East Tennessee's first zero waste refill store, while I was doing my PhD, which was quite the choice, let me tell you. I was in my 3rd year of my doctoral journey, and I was studying these issues every day in my research. And the time frame of change in academia can be very slow, right? So you do research for several years, you work on the analysis of it, you write the papers, you go through the long review process, and maybe 2 or 3 years later, or in this case, the paper that you're referencing, that research I started in 2018, so 5 years later, a paper comes out, and I was left saying, and then what? What's the impact? What's the impact of the research on these problems? And I wanted a shorter time frame of impact. And so I saw the need for refillable options in my community. And I started Knoxfill as a practicing scientist in the waste system. And it's been amazing. I've been obsessed with trash my whole life. And for most of that, I was really focused on downstream solutions. So recycling, composting. And it took me a little time to realize that we really need to find ways to turn off the tap rather than just mop up all the trash that we're pouring onto our planet.
Was there a particular data point or realization that made you rethink your approach to that downstream solution, particularly recycling, but the idea of composting and all the things that we describe as the natural next step may be the wrong way to go? What made you see through that?
I think that, like a lot of other people, when China's national sword happened back in 2018 and the veil was pulled back on different aspects of our recycling system, it really made me reconsider this idea we have that so long as we can put it in the recycling bin, it's a sustainable option. And for folks that aren't familiar with the National Sword Act, this was a policy that the Chinese government put in place limiting recycling imports to less than 0.5% of contamination. Now, recycling contamination rates in the United States are about 25%. These numbers vary, but that's one that we can latch onto. 1 in every 4 items we put in the bin shouldn't be. And so going from a 25% contamination rate to a 0.5% contamination rate is basically impossible. And so this, for all intents and purposes, was a ban on recyclables being exported and received in China. And now, not all of United States recycling is shipped abroad. A lot of it happens domestically. But we were seeing municipal recycling programs get shut down. And we were starting to question this system where we're throwing waste away. So it's out of sight, out of mind. And also seeing that the waste management in these countries that we're shipping it to is really poor, and it's having an impact on the local citizens. So I think I had been on this journey for a little while. And in 2018, when I saw, hey, this system's not as sustainable as we've been promised, that really helped set me on this journey more concretely.
There's the promise in this reality. Do you think that we can improve the recycling and composting system as well as reduce? What's the holistic view that you think we need to be driving toward? Can you define that for us?
I think we can. So I think my holistic view is that the promise of recycling has been overstated, and that we should stop relying on it as a primary solution, and we should put it back into its place in the waste management hierarchy. So if you look at that inverted pyramid from the EPA and the United Nations Environment Program, recycling's starting to get a little towards the bottom, right? We prevent the waste, then we reuse it. We have all these different strategies. And recycling should happen if we can't do those other things, not just be our default mechanism. Now, I think what a lot of people fail to understand is that recycling is a business, and that brings a whole lot of other complications in place, and that recycling of different materials varies significantly. So if we're recycling something like metal, that is infinitely recyclable without degradation in the quality of that material. Now, it's still energy intensive. We still have to transport it. It's still not as good as reusing in the first place.
And you lose a little bit each time you recycle too, but it still is very recyclable.
It's still highly recyclable. Something like paper, each time you're recycling, you are shortening the fibers, right? So paper, it depends. You can usually recycle it 5 to 7 times. Again, that's kind of a general heuristic. It is being degraded each time, but the end of life for a paper product is something that can be returned to the earth. That is something that can be composted. Now, if we think about plastics, that is a whole different can of worms. Plastic recycling requires the addition of virgin material each time. Plastic recycling is really understood to be downcycling. So we're not taking one-to-one. Something like glass, whole other can of worms, which is infinitely recyclable, but most glass recycling right now is just being crushed to use for construction aggregate. But you can think about, we could take this glass mason jar and we could recycle it into another glass container without any loss in quality. Now, you take plastic, and plastics aren't being made from one plastic bottle into another plastic bottle. They're usually being made into polyester fibers, infill, and then the end of life for that next material, that's going to be going to landfills, incinerators, or going into the natural environment. So when we're talking about the circular economy, plastic recycling is not something that's currently circular. Researchers have stated that this is something that plastic recycling delays rather than diverts waste. So it might come out of the waste stream for a cycle, but it's coming back in. And so, you asked me kind of about this holistic approach. We really need to think about the different materials that we have. And recycling right now is really not the solution for our plastic waste problem. Also research came out just earlier this summer that showed that plastic recycling is also releasing millions to billions of microplastic particles into the water. So it's got a lot of unintended effects, which really shows it's not the silver bullet we've been promised.
So you introduced an intention to refill and reuse and to make that convenient and enjoyable for consumers. Tell us about the Knoxfill store. What's it like and who are your customers?
Yeah. So Knoxfill, people are usually completely shocked by the amount of refillable products we have. They might have an idea, oh, I can get hand soap and laundry detergent there. And they come in and we have a refillable version of almost all the personal care and household good products that they currently get in a single-use container. And then another thing we really like to say is it's only single use if you only use it once. So people can bring in these plastic containers, which a lot of times you're looking at them and you're saying, this is durable. This is something that can last and can be reused. So they're bringing in those laundry containers or the bug spray or sunscreen, and we're refilling those containers. So they bring them in, you weigh them to get the tear weight at the beginning, you weigh it at the end. So people are only paying for what they're filling. And our customers, who we call Knoxfillers, are amazing. They are people that are every day that want to make a positive impact on our planet and our community. And many times they are people who have maybe felt disempowered by the big problems we're facing and uncertain how they can make an impact on them. And we're creating this community around sustainability where you can come in and you can say, I know there's a lot of problems. I know the scale of them is huge, but this is my line in the sand. This is my stake saying I'm going to live in line with my values and I'm going to try not to be part of the problem.
Now, how do you select the products that are in the store? Are you also looking at their sustainability, their health impacts, and so forth?
Yeah, so I'm a scientist, right? So we love some data. We select our products with a few different characteristics to make sure they're in line with us and our practices. So first, I always try and source products as locally as possible. So that way I'm investing in my local economy and my local makers. We're also reducing transportation emissions. So in Knoxville, we have dozens of local makers and suppliers. Knoxville is a pretty special city. It's called the Maker City. We've got a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem here. But there are some products that we don't have manufacturers for locally or regionally yet. And so those we do have to find a little bit further. And in those cases, it's really important for me that we are circular on the back end too. So you come into the shop and you can see a 55-gallon drum of laundry detergent and a 5-gallon container of shampoo and say, okay, this is great. This is bulk. You're reducing plastic. But then what happens to that container when it's empty? And what happens to those containers when they're empty is we load them up on a pallet and we send them back to our supplier to be cleaned, sanitized, refilled, and then actually sent to refilleries around the country. With our local suppliers, we return buckets and then get full buckets. We've got local folks that make skincare, things like that. And we are using a variety of creative containers that then get returned and refilled with them. So, it's important to me that across our supply chain, we're having this positive impact. There's a few different elements here at play too, where affordability is important for me because I want to make sure these products are accessible. Now, that's a harder nut to crack. We can't compete with the Unilevers of the world on price. And these are kind of the biggest plastic producers in the first place that are putting the cost for disposal on citizens. All of our waste costs, if you want to call them, they're all internalized. We're cleaning containers, we're processing, we're doing the extra labor.
Well, in that sense, it's not even waste. You're treating it as a material that you're keeping in circulation, which is, I think,
Exactly.
challenges we need to overcome is this idea that this is trash. It's actually got value.
Exactly. Waste is a matter of perception.
Now, I was interested. We've had Lindsay McCoy from Plain Products on the show, for instance, who does refill of their personal care products. And so what you're doing with them, for instance, you said you would package up all the Plain Products packaging on a pallet and send it back to them on a regular basis. How long does it take to collect that much stuff for an individual partner like a Plain Product?
So, if you think about Plain Products, we're not taking back their individual aluminum containers.
Okay, interesting.
We get their products in the ones that we get from them. Their conditioner, for example, we get in a 3.5 gallon bucket. Their face wash, we get in a 1 gallon container. And then our containers are refilling, excuse me, our customers are refilling those small containers in store. Mm-hmm. So we're sending back the big buckets, right?
Okay.
So we're not sending back all of the small 16-ounce aluminum containers. Customers are refilling all of those in our shop.
So it's an opportunity to take that step out of the circular economy too. So there's less shipping for the consumer to send the material back to get it refilled to Plain Products. You can have it done locally. Are there a wide range of brands that are coming to market with that kind of approach? Are you finding they're open to it now?
It's a real challenge. And actually, several brands that were previously doing this with refilleries around the country have taken this out of their business model, or, they've been sold. It's not something they're offering as much because it is more labor intensive. It is hard. You have to coordinate the logistics of getting these containers back, cleaning, sanitizing them. I think there's a real opportunity for the future. We're seeing that this is an issue that's going mainstream with things like Blue Land and Grove Collaborative and all of these things that individual consumers are purchasing from. Some partners and I that own zero waste stores in Nashville, for example, we've been trying to find labs that would do formulations of some of these products close to home. And they really haven't been able to compete on price and quality of ingredients with some of our current suppliers. So it's a bit of a challenge. And I think there's a big market opportunity for more companies to emerge that supply refilleries with this circular model.
So based both on your academic research and the input that you get from folks walking through the door, what kind of information do consumers need to reduce and reuse and when no other option is available, recycle effectively?
I think that we really have to segment consumers a little bit. So, there are some people that will do this no matter how inconvenient, expensive, hard it is, because they are diehard. They care so much about their footprint and they will follow these models to the ends of the earth, right? On the extreme other end of the spectrum, you have people that will probably never embrace this model. So we really need to target this middle group of consumers who care about the planet, which is the majority of Americans, right, are concerned about environmental issues, and we see it close to home. And I think it's both a new and an old way of doing things. So a lot of times I will explain at least our delivery service by using the words, it's like the milkman. We bring you full containers, you give us back empties. And that helps people understand it. But this really is a different way of getting goods that's going to take a little while for people to feel comfortable with. So I think that's part of it, is taking away some of the fear and uncertainty around this new model. I think the other really important things are these products have to compete on quality and they have to compete on price, especially right now. People are struggling. It's becoming more and more expensive to live in the US, and we have to make these products accessible to a broad range of people so that it doesn't just feel like sustainable living and refilling is for the elite consumer to just feel better about ourselves.
Well, in the long run, ultimately, sustainable products are less expensive to make. It's just a question of how do you put the processes in place to enable it to be less expensive, and we're still working all that out. Now, you're absolutely right. It's the middle that we have to change, because the resistant group is literally going to pass away over the course of the next 20 to 50 years, and then there will be new habits in place. So using your journey to waste-free living, what do you think the key changes are that are most effective that can help those middle of the road people start to make less of an impact on the environment?
Yeah. So the other thing we say a lot around Knoxfill is progress over perfection, right? And that's something that I've experienced in my own journey too. Maybe 5 years ago, I would be fighting with my husband over waste that came into our house and very fastidious about everything. And let me tell you, it takes a lot of time and energy, which is not always accessible to everyone. If you want to make all your bread from scratch, if you want to make tofu from soybeans, if you want to do everything to have that Instagrammable zero waste life where all of your trash fits into a mason jar. So my shift has been moving away a little bit from that desire for perfection and not creating any waste,
Mhm.
and focusing on systems change. And I think that that is the shift we need to see more generally, where I tell people, if you have a limited amount of time and energy, yes, do these things to live in line with your values, but also look at where you can create change at scale. So if you are a member of an office that purchases so many water bottles, instead of spending 3 hours of your day trying to make your own bread and avoid that plastic film, maybe spend time advocating for change in your workplace and getting a water filter. So I think that's actually the change that I'm advocating for more and more, while making these options more available and accessible to the average person. Because I think what we're experiencing right now many times is a crisis of disempowerment, where people feel like the scale of the problems is so big that our actions don't matter. And if you feel like that, you aren't really going to feel like it makes any difference whether you buy your shampoo in a disposable container or you refill it. So we need to focus on letting people know that their actions do matter and they can create change both in their households, their workplaces, their schools, themselves, and moving away from this all or nothing thinking, which says corporations are the ones that did this. They have to change. And until they change, my actions don't matter. Corporations do have to change. I'm a huge advocate for that. But also, if we don't force that change, they're not going to.
Uh, a song we sing on the show frequently. And so much I want to talk about here, but let's take a quick commercial break. We're going to be right back. Let's get back to talk more with Michaela Barnett about reuse. She started Knoxfill, a refill and reuse retailer in Knoxville, Tennessee. Uh, and Knoxville collects a lot of recyclables in the store, candy wrappers and razor blades. You send this stuff to TerraCycle, the specialty recycler. Does offering that kind of service in store drive foot traffic? Is it a way for a retailer to engage their community more deeply?
I think it's an added bonus for our customers. I think that they are excited to know we have it. But for folks that aren't already seeking out our services, it's
Mhm.
not bringing more people in. And also because, we've had this conversation about recycling. I think with TerraCycle and with these specialty boxes, there is a better chance that these will have a second life
Mhm.
than if they go to landfill. But there's these challenges that still exist, and we're very open and upfront about about that. So I think people get really excited to know that we have all of these options beyond just refilling. So it's a happy bonus more than a consumer driver, I would say.
Do you think if we master the process that retailers could be an efficient collection point for packaging and other end of use products?
I think so. I think that we are really lucky to have very high intention customers. So they are doing the sorting of the waste in ways that help increase the chances that these will get recycled effectively. But ultimately, I think if we are trying to move away from just recycling and more to systems of reuse and collection, I don't want to give consumers mixed messages, right? I think that these stores would be amazing points of collection for reuse at scale. Now, recycling at scale, we've talked about the challenges there. So I don't know is the answer to that question.
A fair answer. I think one of the challenges we have is when we think about the interface, like we're talking about, is retail potentially a place where we could be doing this? We've always started from our relationship with the waste stream, and your surveys, your academic surveys, that consumers don't really know what to put in the bin. Do you see the single stream, that the kind of the anchoring of all of our circular thinking on the waste and waste stream potential blocker, and would be thinking about diversifying our recycling system, our composting system, our refill system as broadly as possible? How I know that's not really a question, but what do you think we can do?
It's a double-edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, many of the problems that we're experiencing did come from the rise in single stream recycling, which made recycling more convenient, easier, gave us broader reach, but then removed a lot of the labor of sorting from consumers to these downstream workers and facilities. And yeah, so you lose on convenience and you lose out on a certain sector of people that would otherwise be recycling. But if you do start to divide it out, you improve the quality stream, the material stream of recycling, you increase the value, you make it more profitable as a business. And I think we do also have models for this in different places. So this is something that would probably never happen in the United States. I had a new person I met coming to school here from South Korea, and we were talking about waste and their waste system. And I said, "Oh, you guys really have it figured out. I admire your waste management system a lot." And she said, "You know what? I had a friend who tied up, some waste and he threw it in the wrong bin. And now in South Korea, you have to purchase different bags for different waste streams. And so there's that cost associated, and you can only place the colored bag in the correct waste stream." And she said they went through this bag that had gone in the wrong place. They found some junk mail that had his name and address on it, and they fined him for putting it in the wrong waste stream. I didn't know that that actually happened. Can you imagine how crazy that is? And he's never going to do that again. And so I'm not saying that's the model we need to move towards, but I do think a higher degree of segmentation will improve the quality of these products. We're saying, they're not waste, they still have value, and also could really help consumers see this isn't just a black box where you put it in the bin and then say, "Oh, something great happens to it," but be a little more engaged in that process.
One of the things that we exchanged some email about is the idea of extended producer responsibility, which is a new type of law for those listeners who aren't familiar with it, that requires the manufacturers or the companies that use the products and the packaging that they needs to be recycled to pay for the recycling of the system that supports it. Do you think that we can use EPR as a basis for erecting a new collection and reuse infrastructure? Because there's so much value that could be created and retained locally if we just enabled reuse at scale too. Can we Do we have a financial mechanism in EPR to achieve that?
Absolutely. EPR is, when I look at EPR policies, it's like a kid that loves ice cream standing outside of an ice cream shop. I'm not saying that it's going to be a cure-all for these problems, but right now, companies really, there is no accountability mechanism to keep them from polluting our planet at the scale at which they are doing it. And so there also isn't a huge incentive, aside from public pressure, to really improve the recyclability or circularity of their products, because it's not them paying for the recycling. It's not them figuring out what to do with it. This burden is placed on us as taxpayers, and then the different various interconnecting municipal and business systems that come after it. And so I think putting that onus back on the companies creating the waste to manage the recycling system will lead to both a decrease in the amount of waste that we're producing and hopefully designs for improved recyclabilities of the products they're creating.
Do you think that if manufacturers treated the EPR program differently and thought of it instead of as this obligation to clean up their mess, a way to tune their relationship with the market, could that potentially be the right way to go about this? To say, with the feedback you can receive through the EPR program about what people are using, not using, recycling and not recycling, you can reduce your packaging weight, the need for packaging, and plastic consumption and pollution generally, so that you have a good ESG story to tell.
I love the idea of taking a positive spin on it and promoting the benefits. I think that's how we get a variety of industries to buy in and participate in sustainability initiatives. So maybe that is one tactic. I do think it's not great PR to find hundreds of Coca-Cola or Pepsi bottles along the beaches when we're doing these trash cleanups. So I think it's going to be a variety of different mechanisms, but I also know that the model of business for these businesses will have to change if we want it to be compatible with a healthy, prosperous, and livable future. And that is scary, but creates some opportunity, perhaps.
Absolutely. Do you have a sense of, if you had the opportunity to sit down with the CEO of Unilever, who is a company generally committed to being sustainable, what would you tell them they ought to change today?
We'd need a couple weeks together, probably.
Okay, so one thing, if you just had one moment, what would you say? Change this.
If I had one moment, it's interesting and kind of hard, because just like the fossil fuel companies are being rebranded as energy companies and are the ones that are going to be leading this transition without maybe sort of justice for the harm that's been caused, I think that the Unilevers of the world, who have been the plastic polluters, are also going to be the ones starting to embrace refilling. And I'm happy about that for the planet. And I also wonder what that looks like for small companies like mine that have really started to lead this change. So I think one thing that I would love to see would maybe be if they could offer some of their green brands that they like to have in their portfolio to distract from some of the other ones, if they could start offering those in bulk at scale to existing refilleries instead of a prospect in the future of competing us out in the market, because we've been doing this work. So that's maybe one discussion I would like to have.
Let's look at the other end of the spectrum, and that is the consumer. When a customer walks into Knoxfill for the first time and says, "What's this all about?" How do you explain the sustainable economy to them? Just as we talked about convenience and price needing to precede sustainability in many cases, what would you tell them about why it's a benefit to embrace sustainability?
Yeah, well, we've got a really compelling answer super close to home, which is that the Tennessee River is one of the most plastic polluted rivers in the world.
So you can point at something.
So we can point to something locally. And people can also say, yeah, I've seen more trash. And no, this doesn't make sense. And I look at this high density polyethylene laundry container and I say, why do I have to buy a new one of these every month and then take up space in my recycling bin or my garbage? So most people get it. And the ones that don't, we walk them around the store and we talk about problems with the plastic recycling system at the nationwide level, how, our national recycling rate for plastics is between 5 and 8%. So that means between 92 and 95% of plastics are being landfilled, being incinerated or used for waste to energy, or they're ending up in the natural environment. And we give people a way to participate in the change, and that is really powerful.
How can folks start shopping at Knoxville? You do mail order. Tell us
We
about
don't. We don't
what
do shipping.
I thought you
So
did.
we've talked about doing it for the future. We are a hyper local business. We do local delivery. We
So your
do
shopping is for, oh, okay. So when I've been on the site, I thought I would be able, when I add something to the cart, that I would be, so,
and you'll see too, there's different communications about local pickup on there and local shopping. We've talked about adding that in the future, and particularly for goods that are easier to ship. And the thing I would say is first make sure that there's not a refillery in your local area. So a good way to find that is there's a website called litterless.com. There is a resource on social media called the Refillery Collective. You can also use search terms like zero waste store near me, refill shop near me, refillery, bulk store. So rather than patronizing Knoxfill, which, like I said, we may be offering low waste shipping in the future, but there are these businesses really across the country, and I'm well connected to them. We have a series of online groups where we're sharing resources, best practices daily. There are a few places that do offer low waste shipping. So the Goodfill in Nashville, they ship refillables. The Package Free Shop does it. A retailer called Rustic Strength does some shipping. So there are different options, but when I started the business 2.5 years ago, I said, I want this to be something that is hyper local and a bit of a different model where we're sourcing products locally and people are consuming locally, and we're not having these different transportation emissions and packaging waste. And so far we've been able to do that. I think as we expand, we want to continue enabling these offerings to more people. So it's something that I'm engaged in deep thought about.
so when you think about expansion, what does that look like? Does that mean more physical locations in order to have more hyper local solutions? And is that something that can scale beyond your immediate region simply because of the urgency of your relationship with your local market?
Yes. So there's a few different ways that I've thought about scaling. And one really is empowering people to do a very similar model to what we've done because they know their local consumers, they know their local makers and suppliers. So that could be either through an online course or a franchise model where it really is much more democratic and community driven. Because I got my PhD in civil engineering from the University of Virginia, and I'm connected to the university here in different ways. My husband works at the National Lab here in Oak Ridge. We've also talked about what it would look like to develop autonomous refill stations where we could put the most commonly needed refillable items, hand soap, dish soap, etc., laundry detergent, closer to the point of consumption. So whether that means locating these in apartment buildings or higher density areas so that people can refill really conveniently. And actually it's more convenient than going to the shop. So that's one refill option. or one expansion option as well. So there are some different things brewing, definitely, where I think Knoxfill could be something that exists out of Knoxville. Of course, that name would have to be a bit different.
Michaela, this has been a really interesting conversation. Thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We've been speaking with Knoxfill founder, Michaela Barnett. Look for a link to her commentary on the role of recycling in the next economy in the article that accompanies this podcast. And you can learn more about Knoxfill at knoxfill.com. That's Knoxfill, knoxfill.com. As you heard, I fell victim to my ingrained assumptions about e-commerce when I assumed that Knoxfill ships refillable products all over the country. We've become accustomed to the idea that anything can be shipped to our homes just since the turn of the century, and that malleability of our expectations is evidence that many more changes are possible. Michaela and her team at Knoxfill offer local delivery and a mobile refillery, a kind of food truck for refills, to make reuse and refilling available as widely as possible within their communities. And by keeping supply chains short using local products and refusing to ship nationally, they help reduce not just the plastic consumption, but also the carbon emissions and other impacts of our daily lives. I hope you take a few minutes to find your local refill options at litterless.com or refillerycollective.com to change your take, make, waste buying habits to reduce your impact. There's a lot we can do as consumers. It's a choice that we make every day. Go to the store, buy something that you can only use once and throw away, or buy something that can be refilled over and over again. Choose the latter and you can make a difference. I hope you take a few minutes, too, to share this podcast or any of the more than 420 interviews that we've done on sustainability in your ear. Writing a review on your favorite podcast platform also helps your neighbors find us, folks. You're the amplifiers who spread more ideas so we can create less waste. Tell your friends you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or any of the other fine purveyors of podcast goodness out there. Thanks, folks, for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, please take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.